We are going to do our community group training on that note. So our wonderful Rachel is going to help me do this training, and we have our core team here. As always, we're going to film it so that as people come in, they can get to train as well. So our community group time is every other week. It rotates with middle school and high school. So high school will do it, and then the next week middle school will do it. And then whoever doesn't have community groups will get a sermon. So that's kind of how we operate our community group time. We just want to go over some of the particulars of how we run it, some of the things that are important for leaders to know, and the purpose behind why we're doing what we're doing. And then if you guys have any questions, we can try to answer questions. I'll mostly give them to Rachel because she's the smart one. Yeah. So first of all, what would you say are some of the most important reasons we have community group? What's the purpose of community groups? What do you guys think? What does that mean?
So Rachel.
Huh? You guys.
You guys.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. It's a great opportunity to just hang out with people because youth group is not only coming in and learning about God. Well, it is, but it puts that into practice and it builds community for us to just be with people and exercise the other part of being a Christian. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. It's totally relational, like you said. And so the message tends to be more, giving content. I try to be interactive with the message, but this is a time when you can be face-to-face. And so when you're thinking about like new people coming in to community groups, it's really important to create a safe environment for them because you guys remember, think back to a time when you joined a group for the first time and you didn't know anybody or you only knew one person, and it can be pretty scary, right? Unless you're a crazy extrovert. But, yeah. But, and so if you join a community group, it's your first time there, and then the leader's like, you answer a question, it makes it even worse. And so we're looking for a place where people feel safe, where they can kind of feel like they can talk if they want to. And then as they're more a part of it and feel more comfortable, have more relationships, then we can do more like encouraging them to speak up and get out of their comfort zone and things like that. We want to have fun together. We want it to be lighthearted. There's a lot of laughing and yeah. Yep. So we want to help students apply the message in really practical ways. It's really easy to preach out of the Bible and say, this is what it says. But what's equally important with that is what do I do with that? How do I apply that to my life? If we don't live any differently because of what we're learning from the Bible, then it's in a lot of ways not helpful. And so community groups is a time where you take what you're learning with the message and wrestle with it and wrestle with case studies or practical ways to apply it. And then finally, we want it to be a really supportive time when students are going through challenging times. And this is for all the community groups in church. So we've had people that lost spouses, people that were going through job situations, people that, they're up at the altar crying because life's just throwing them some hard times, and you'll see their community group come forward and wrap around them. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how we do that as a community group so that you support each other, and then the adult leaders have some insights about what the youth are going through so that they can come alongside them too. So we're going to talk about how you can prepare for community groups and talk about the three sections we have, game time, discussion time, and prayer time. And that'll just give you an idea of how we run things. So for how to prepare, I'm going to give things over to Rachel.
Because I prepare it. Mm-hmm. So this will probably go more towards leaders as opposed to youth, but youth can definitely be involved in it. One of the things, once we get a video of the first week of message, I'll look at it, go through it, kind of write down some main points and thoughts. And then anything that I want to give back to the community group leaders, I put into a Google Doc. So adults will actually be able to have like the access to it so that they can prep ahead of time, kind of know the structure or what are some of the questions that are going to be asked about it prior to that Wednesday night, which is helpful, especially if it's maybe a more sensitive topic or a topic they're not as familiar with, or if they missed the message. Also helpful.
Yeah. And it'll be here if you don't have a chance to look at it.
Right. So 2 spots you can really look at it. Can
you say that in the microphone?
Sorry. This is where it'll be held if you don't look at it on the Google Doc.
Yes.
The other thing is able to look through games. We try, and we'll get a little bit more into this in the game time, but if there are any supplies that are needed, if maybe you need to prep as the adult leader in some aspect of the game, that can be in there as well. But most of the time, all the supplies will be kind of available to us when you guys start. A couple other parts is that you guys are able to, as you prep, pray for students by name that are in your group. Hopefully you get more and more familiar with kind of the regulars that are there, but also the ones that are on the outskirts. So it might be connecting with them through a group message to anyone. It might be connecting with them as they're here for maybe the night that they show up and it's been like 4 weeks. But you're able to kind of pray through each of them as you prep for that week. Lastly, and actually this has been something that the core team has actually been good at, and I haven't necessarily had to talk to them about it, but involving youth in the kind of core community group process. So what I've noticed is that if there are questions that are asked and there's a little bit of a lull in conversation, core team members tend to step in and fill that gap. Have you guys noticed that at all? I look at you because I know like you and Zoe do it a lot.
Yeah.
But Joe, what about you?
Yeah, there's people who do it, yeah, definitely.
Some more so than others.
Yeah.
But that could also be a thing of, letting some of the core team or youth that you feel comfortable with looking at what's going to be talked about, showing them ahead of time, getting them used to being a vocal part of that group. So the first part of a community group is game night or game time, and that's about 10 minutes. We split it up into thirds. We have roughly 30 minutes for a community group, so game time's 10, discussion 10, prayer 10. And you can kind of gauge if they're really having fun with the game. Sometimes I'll say like, hey, we'll try and like do it again at the end if we have time after prayer. Usually we don't. I see the look that Laura's giving me. But acknowledging that they're having fun. If it's going a little bit slow, you can end it a little bit early. It shouldn't be chaos, but it should still be fun. I know. The loudness would dictate that there is chaos. However, it is very structured. It's controlled. And it allows kind of the competition to come out. It allows for others just to kind of see the fun that's involved even while at a youth group. And I think that's really key because sometimes the church has that persona of being straight-laced and very, very serious in what we do, and we only sit and get lectured at. But this is a very kind of loose and informal type of a gathering where you guys get to have fun, you guys get to have fun with each other, but also with the leader. And I think that's really important too, to build that into it. So like Laura was saying, you learn about God, but then you put that to work in here of if you notice someone is not talking or not getting involved, like bringing them into that game time.
Yeah, that's good. Always under the heading of being relational, right? So in having fun together, you're building friendships together, and you will find as a group leader that there's a connection between how much fun people are having in the game and how good the discussion is after the game. Because if people have a lot of fun together, they'll be more willing to open up and just feel safer with each other. So there's a great purpose there. As far as the discussion time goes, and like Rachel said, it doesn't have to be a perfect 10 minutes. You can have the discussion go a little longer. Sometimes the prayer times have gone longer. But that's kind of a general structure to keep in mind. It's really important to create a safe environment for people to have a discussion. We have to continually remember, this is not just for new students, this is for all students, that there are a lot of students that do not like to put themselves out there with an answer. And it might be actually pretty like a courageous thing for them to put out their idea. And so when students say things, if people laugh at them, or if people kind of point out how stupid it is or anything like that, you may cause a student to shut up for the rest of their youth group experience. It's a one and done type of thing. So it's tricky because, we all have ideas that we share. They're a little goofy sometimes. It's not like all answers are great, except for Lauda. All her answers are perfect. But it can be tricky sometimes to handle some of those stranger answers, but always keeping in the back of our mind that it took courage to say that and to honor that courage. One thing that I've found, so we have this idea in our head as we're doing discussions that it's like shallow and deeper. And you feel it out where if the discussion's going well, then you look for ways to take it a little deeper. If people aren't talking, there's nothing wrong with taking it more shallow in order to get people to open up more. So for instance, one of the hardest groups is usually middle school boys, to get them to speak up. And I've been in many middle school boys groups where nobody wants to say anything. The adult leader is just talking the whole time. It's like, if you just want to stop the discussion and say, hey, what's your guys' favorite video game? And just let them talk about video games, they will talk and share and start to open up more than you ever thought possible. And it can be easier to scaffold from that time to oh, you play this game that has to do with Egyptian history. That's actually part of what we're talking about, is the life of Moses or something like that. So if one of the things that we run into with community group leaders a lot is they won't answer questions. So if they won't answer questions, go more shallow and just look for things that are interesting in their lives, or stuff going on in their world, stuff about school, and just so that they'll open up and talk, and it can be more helpful to get into deeper things at that point. Again, it should be very practical as far as the content. So you're always thinking, how should my life be different because of what I learned? That's what you're trying to come away with, even if it's just one thing. We learned about forgiveness. So how should my life be different because of this? How do I apply this specifically? And keep coming back to connecting material to their world. So for me, I have a son who's 8, which is wonderful for stories and, funny ideas and things like that. But I have to be careful because I can talk a lot about parenting, because that's where I'm at in my life. And none of our youth have kids. And so I have to keep coming back to this is what this looks like in your world, in a teenager world, in school and things like that. So when you're talking with them, keep looking for ways to build bridges to where they're at, to where they live with the questions you ask. Questions should be open-ended, and it's pretty easy to know if a question is open-ended. If it can be answered with yes or no, it is closed-ended question. And so a closed question would be something like, did you finish your homework this week? And they could answer yes or no. And part of the problem with questions like this is that they really don't go very far in creating discussion, because people just say yes or no, and then it's like, okay, well, great. An open-ended question would be like, how did homework go this week? And then, bad.
It didn't.
And then that creates a more open-ended discussion to go with it where they want to go. And the questions we provide are usually going to be open-ended, but a lot of times as you're leading a discussion, you might want to come up with questions on the fly. This is a big one. Don't be afraid of silence. especially if people are thinking. Okay, if you ask a question and you get like some of this, that's a great thing. We want students to be thinking and wrestling with concepts. And so sometimes something I'll say that can help break it a little bit and be less awkward is something like, I know that's a tough question, so I'm just going to give you a minute to think about it. And then everybody's like, oh, okay, so you can think about it and see what questions come up. Sometimes I'll say something like, you know what, like really wrestle with this one, like challenge yourself to come up with something, even if it's hard, and then just let them think. But for when I started out in ministry, it was really hard to have times of silence in prayer or in community groups. It just was like awkward. I didn't like it. And we really got to push through that, because that can be an important time of where they're learning and processing things. Try to manage students who talk too much or not enough. Now, again, new students get a pass on stuff like this. We want to give them plenty of time to just feel included and integrated into the group. But you're going to have both. You're going to have students that want to dominate the conversation. Sometimes they're trying to help because nobody else will talk. And then you'll have usually more students that you're trying to get some answers out of. So there are a couple ways you can do this. If you have a student that really is consistently dominating the conversation over and over again, and you've done some signals like, hey, can we get somebody else's answer first? And you've tried that and they continually come in, then it's okay to talk to them after the community group time, or better yet, before the next time, because likely they'll forget in 2 weeks, and just say something like, so this week I'm really trying to get some answers out of the whole group, and man, you have a lot of amazing answers, but if you could just keep it to like 1 or 2 this week and really pick your best answers, that would help me with what I'm trying to do with some of the other students and get them on board ahead of time. And you could do the same thing with students that you would like to talk more. You could approach them beforehand and be like, we're talking about this. I just would love to hear some of your insights. I appreciate what you have to say. And I'm not like forcing you to do anything, but if you hear something that you have an answer to, like, let's go for it. And many times they'll step up to that challenge. When you're in the group, you can try to make it kind of organic and informal with people just speaking out. But if it starts to get where a couple people are dominating, you can say, hey, let's raise our hands if we have an answer. And then you can not call on that person, or say something, a lot of times they'll be the only ones with their hands up, and you just say something like, let's see if anybody else has an answer. I see you, and let's see what else we got first. And those are some ways that you can just get everybody involved. Again, if you're having a hard time getting feedback or conversation, make it more shallow. What kind of school events are going on, and what kind of movies are you guys watching, or just something to kind of get people talking. Any questions at this point? No? Good? Have you guys found some of this stuff to be true in your community group experience? Does that make sense? Nice.
Right. It all makes sense now.
Yeah. Oh, this is how it goes behind the scenes. Shoot. She's working on how to get around the strategies already. And then finally, we have our prayer time. So I'm going to hand it back to Rachel for this.
So this is one area that we really wanted to at least expand on, or at least structure it differently from the previous way we had community groups. One of the ways that we have implemented is that we have prayer journals in here for each group. And we write down kind of the date, and we'll go through and say whose prayer request is what. But one of the other things we like to do, and this was something from one of our previous adult leaders that used to be at the youth group, was she had this prayer journal, and she'd be able to look back and see how God answered those prayers. And so we check in like every week when we have these groups and say like, hey, Laura, I know that this was your prayer request last week or 2 weeks ago. How is that going? And it creates a nice time for check-in with things that are going on, with things maybe that are on their heart, and just seeing how like that progress is going, or if they just need that support, if they just need that listening ear that is present within the group. That also allows us, or allows them to kind of report back to us, or if we need to take something that we learn about within our community groups and bring it back to Josh, if there's something that's a little bit bigger of an issue that's being talked about, it creates a nice kind of ladder, a chain, and an ear.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
So this is a huge issue in the church across the board, because people, like, part of our job as pastors is to care for people and minister to them in their time of need. And they always expect us to know. Whether they tell us or not, or whether we find out or not, they expect us to know. And so this is one of the ways that can really help us as pastors to be there for people and to step in when there's a crisis, is when they bring it up to you in your community groups. We really rely on you to send that up the chain to the pastors so that we can get involved and serve them however we can.
And it's just a nice way to additionally build that community, that Christian community, so to speak, because we bring everything. We bring the praises, we bring the good, we bring the bad, we bring the scary, we bring things that we don't want to deal with alone, and that's what comes out, hopefully comes out. And it's that process of the game and the discussion that we hope creates that safe space to talk about things that are maybe always at the back of our mind, or that we're really concerned about, so we're not concentrating on things today. And then we can kind of switch up the structure, whether it's the leader praying for everything that was mentioned during that prayer request time, whether it's kind of handing that book. That's what makes this kind of really nice, is we write it down and then we can hand it to someone to pray, or just as we go, stop, pause, pray for the person that just requested a prayer, and then continue on. And it allows us to have a little bit more freedom for our prayer time.
So there is a ton of different ways that you can do a prayer time together. In fact, before the service, we pray different ways almost every single week. And so try different things. It helps not to get stuck in a rut of doing it the same way every time. So for instance, you can have a week where you ask everyone to pray and just do like a short prayer. You can have a week where you have, 3 requests and you assign 3 people to pray for that. You can have a week where you have people pray out when they're ready, or when you go around the circle, or take some time to pray silently. There's just a ton of different ways to do it. But that time really helps students feel cared for, especially if you remember the prayer requests from the previous week, which is what the journal really helps with. And a lot of times in community groups, the agenda of the leader is to get people to open up. And that is not our first agenda in Ignite community groups. It's important when people open up, it's helpful, but our first agenda is that people would feel cared for. And so if people feel cared for, then that's the big win for us. And so having fun in game time, being able to apply things to their life so they know how to live it out, and really feeling like somebody knows what they're going through and can come alongside them and support them. Those are all things that need to oftentimes come before somebody's willing to put themselves out there. And teenagers feel it. I mean, you guys, if you've ever had an experience where an adult leader was just trying to get you to open up, and especially if you didn't really know them, and they're like, hey, how's your life? How's your heart? You're just like, it's like, it's good. Go away. I've seen that many, many times. And so that's not the first step. There are times when students need to open up and share, but it's way more important in the beginning to present the message that you're valuable. We love spending time with you. We want to help you walk through the things that you're going through, all those things. We want to have fun with you. We want to spend time with you. And that provides opportunities for some of the other things down the line. But that's what we really want you to focus on. So any questions about any of the stuff we talked about? Seem pretty straightforward. So Rachel writes our community group curriculum, and so you can always talk to her. And I know she loves feedback because it is surprisingly difficult to write questions and see how they play out. So you can always come to her and say, hey, could you, we could go deeper with that, or could you reel that in a little bit, or change this or that. It makes a big difference. Cool?